Today's episode is literally all barn burners.
Have you considered doing a zip sheathing with spray foam? Do we build up or out? Will you contact the city I live in to see if they will allow a barndo to be built, or do I have to do that?
Yeah, so we the best practice there is What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Barndo Show. Today's episode is literally all barn burners. So we've got Miss Jenna here, right? She's my marketing assistant. She's the operations behind this podcast. She's the one that's always scouring the internet for all your questions and all the insights and what you want to hear about and everything. So she has a massive list, and rather than spread it out over a bunch of episodes, so let's just jump on here and let's just tackle some of them. So we're going to go through a few questions, and I'm going to give you my perspective on it, and do with it what you will, okay? So go ahead, Jenna. What
All
we
right. So as you said, I did scour the internet. We have all of our Barndo groups that we get a lot of questions in. I mean, one of them we have like over 500K people in there asking questions all day long.
There's a lot of opinions in that room.
A lot of opinions, but going through some questions. The first one I have is, have you considered doing a zip sheathing with spray foam, a rain screen on the outside of the sheathing under the metal siding or roofing?
That's a good question. So, of course, we've considered it. There's things that go into that consideration for us as a builder. So I'll try to break that down into a few segmented answers. So have we ever considered doing zip board? Sure we have. I think zip is a great system. It's a very high performing system. It's a lot easier to install if you're trained to install it. Basically the biggest difference with that, and so what we're talking about, if you're unfamiliar, is Zip is a brand of exterior sheathing system that kind of replaces the use of oriented strand board, OSB, or plywood, or any other kind of exterior sheathing you'd put on a home. So at Barndo, our standard practice is oriented strand board or plywood, depending on the municipality, and we'll apply that to the roof deck as well as the exterior walls, and then we use Type R house wrap. And in my opinion, Type R is the top performing building wrap that you can use. I've always thought that to be true, and there's tons and tons of scientific data on why it's the best one. In addition to just being high performing, it's a really rugged type house wrap, so it holds up well to the metal siding that gets installed over it. So if they scrub it or something, it doesn't have the tendency to just rip or shred. It's made out of really robust polypropylene material, and it's just it's a phenomenal system. It's always been my preference, and to be honest, I prefer that over the Zip system, but that's just a personal preference. So that's what we do as typical. Now the reason behind that is, it's more affordable in the way that we build and in all the different areas that we build. So the Zip system is fantastic. Basically what it is the exterior sheathing already has the weather membrane built onto the sheet. And so when you apply that Zip system, everything's already sheathed basically. So you're eliminating an extra step. So after that sheathing goes on, you don't have to come back and then apply house wrap. It's already there. And you know that every piece of that board is covered. Now, the second step of that system is they have an adhesive tape that you run between every seam. So everywhere that those panels butt together on every vertical and horizontal, butt joint, you have to apply this tape, and you're supposed to use a specific roller and make sure that you roll all the bubbles out. And you got to be. That's why I say if you're trained in installation, because if you install it improperly, it's worthless. But so you've got this kind of pressure sensitive adhesive strip that you put down, and you use a little roller and you roll it and apply it, and that creates your weather barrier, right? I've always known to be true, and I could be wrong, right? So if you've got some scientific data, not just an opinion, feel free to drop it in here and in the comments. But the MVTR rating of Type R is superior to that of a zip system, and that's important in high humidity climates where we typically build. So as much as I like zip, and I think it would perform absolutely fine, it's absolutely tested to perform here, but I still think that the Type R system is slightly better. Mm-hmm. Now, I think the zip system's slightly better than oriented strand board, but if you're in a plywood situation, I think plywood and Type R, in my opinion, is a better performing system. And then but again, cost is the driving factor for us, because if we were to go to zip systems on our roof decks and then again on our exterior walls, there would be some element of additional cost in there because the material itself is more expensive. And then like with the house wrap, we also have the ability to brand it. So we can, if you've ever seen our builds, not every market, because again, it's, as we expand, it takes a little while to get some of those things there. But in a lot of our existing markets, you'll see the Barndo logo on the Type R. That's just a cool marketing thing. It lets people know, and when we take pictures of that house in construction, it resonates our logo and our marketing throughout it. And so if someone shares that photo, it's got our name on it. So I like that aspect of it. That's the marketing side in me.
Yeah, I know when we went to the Home and Garden show, we had that.
Yeah.
That whole little Barndo kind of built out and had that on the side. So that's always pretty cool to see too.
No, for sure. Well, I mean, that has nothing to do with the performance of it, but it is a cool marketing feature that I think that house wrap gives over that system. And if we were using a low quality contractor wrap, then zip would blow it out of the water in performance. But because we are using the Type R system, we're already using like one of the most high performing building envelope wraps that you could possibly put on a residential construction. So zip is great. Some drawbacks potentially I'll give you drawbacks to both systems. So I talked a little bit about how Type R isn't really prone to ripping, but what can happen is, especially on really tall gable walls, when they're going to put those panels up, if they're not careful and the house wrap's not attached properly, or they didn't tape a seam right, that it can wrinkle underneath there. And so if that happens, and our guys do a great job making sure that doesn't happen, but that is the flaw in the field, is if that you're sliding that siding up onto that wall side and then that house wrap crinkles up underneath it, that's a problem. And if you didn't correct that problem when you installed it, then you potentially just created a moisture problem in your home, right? So that area that it crinkled up in is not going to perform right. The downside to a zip system is if something were to happen where that board was damaged, then the whole board's got to be replaced. Yeah. Unless it's small enough that you could cover it with the patch tape. But in the event that something like that were to happen, you'd have to remove the entire panel and put a new panel in. So that's not as big of a deal on the front end of construction, but let's talk about down the road. If you had a warranty issue, or you had some kind of maintenance problem, or you something happened, right? If there's a house wrap system underneath there, when they pull down the damaged panels to replace them, they can cut a new sheet, cut out the old, slap it in there, tape it in, it's good to go. With the zip system, to really reinstall it correctly, you would have to remove the damaged boards, put in new boards, and it may require you to take down additional pieces of metal, stuff like that. Now, that's like worst case scenarios, but I'm trying to give like a really good optic on the differences. But that would be my take on those. Now, to move into the rain screen. So rain screen, if you're unfamiliar with that, is Type R has one as well. But basically what it is you take a high performance building wrap like a Type R, and then they extrude these little coils of material, and I think it's somewhere between 1/4 to 1/2 inch of space there. And basically, the thought process behind that is when you put the cladding or the siding or whatever you're installing onto that rain screen, those little extruded coils are going to compress, but not compress completely, and so it provides additional separation from the moisture barrier itself. So in high humidity or like coastal regions, for example, like if you have an area that's hot, that's just super susceptible to a lot of rain and a lot of moisture and humidity, if moisture were to get trapped back there, the thought process is there's more room for that water or moisture to drain out more effectively. So yes, I can see the advantage of that. We don't use it, but again, we don't really build in extreme coastal conditions. But I could absolutely see a need for it. And if we were in an area to where we thought that would be a better solution, because maybe you decided to go with like hardy siding or something, because the metal panels already kind of have ribs in them that it would be duplicitous to have a rain screen behind it. But if you were going with like a hardy siding or some other kind of more traditional type siding, and you were in one of these heavy rain areas or a high moisture content zone, like yes, like that would be something we could bring into the equation to talk about. But again, the biggest reason why we don't utilize zip is primarily it's a cost differentiator, and then secondarily it's training everyone to install it properly. Because again, if you don't, you might be able to get it up on the wall, great, but if you don't tape those seams just perfectly, you're not really doing the system justice.
All right, so we've got another question from our Barndominium Designs and Layouts group. You know, we got a lot of people in there just getting ideas from other people. So we've got one person asking, do we build up or out? We want to have around 3 to 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms.
Right. So they're talking about, do we build multiple stories or do we build ranch? So if you've ever been on our website, you see tons and tons of like ranch style plans. We build a lot of single story plans. And I can only speak to what's true for us. So for us, it costs the same in most cases, right? 9 out of 10 cases. It costs the same for us to build out as it does to build up. And that's just due to the way we construct. You know, when you're going vertical, you get into having to do an engineer floor systems and all these different things. And because we're building post-frame structures, a lot of times the concept behind it is you want clear span. So if you're building with a clear span in mind, you don't really want to create load-bearing walls inside of the structure. You can, but again, one of the advantages are these big clear span areas where you can have these big ceilings and these big areas like in common living spaces that everybody loves. And so to go in and then say, okay, I want to add additional living above that area. Now you got to do engineered flooring systems to span that as well, or you have to go back in and kind of diminish that space by creating load-bearing points inside of it. So it ends up being about the same to build up versus out for us, right? So like if you're building 2-story plan, or if you're building 1-story plan, we're charging you the same. Now, historically, you would say like, well, you got additional grading, you got additional foundation work. All that's true. You got less roofing, all those kind of things. But in the style of construction we do, there's not as much of a differentiator to building out versus up until you cross over the threshold of about 6,000 to 7,000 square feet. Then it makes sense sometimes from a cost savings perspective to start going vertical. I guess the biggest limiting factor, if you're considering that, would be, from my perspective, would be, what does your land look like? You know, like the only reason that I would be building an additional floor on my home is because the home I'm building is too big for the lot that I have.
Yeah, and I've got a lot.
Yeah.
On a huge hill.
Yeah, so like, that would be the only thing. Like if you're trying to design a house that's 100 foot wide and your lot's only 90, that ain't gonna work. So I could see instances where land restrictions would require me to build vertical, or like you say, it's built on a slope, so you end up with a basement area. So you have that additional floor system in there for your main living area and then your basement. But yeah, for the most part, it's the same cost to build up versus out, at least the way we construct. And again, something to consider is, aging in your home. Like,
I was just about to bring this up. I see it a lot. A lot of people, a lot of the clients that we help, this is going to be their forever home. So just thinking about accessibility in the future.
Yeah.
So
it would be better to have a home that you could access under limited mobility and not need it than to need that and not have it.
Yep.
So we put a lot of forethought into that when we're designing plans and layouts. And again, we have several builds that we do that are multi-story. Nothing wrong with it. But again, just total concept of like, hey, I'm building this and I want to live here forever. And that tends to be the clients we're attracting. Like, hey, we're building our forever home. That may not always be the case, but that's what they're doing. Yeah, keep that in mind. If you're putting stairs in your home, are you going to love those stairs 15, 20 years from now?
Yeah.
You know, or you're going to be like, why did we do this?
5 years from now.
Yeah.
All right. So next question we have is it okay to build a barndominium on top of a slab that a house was demolished on?
No. Like, we wouldn't do it. And could you do it? Yeah, of course you could. There's some things you need to consider there, though. Again, half the country doesn't have building codes, so you can kind of go out there and just do whatever you want to do.
Out in the wild, wild west.
It's crazy. But in an area where you're having to, you know, follow, you know, the international codes, like there's calculated load that goes into these homes. So if you've got a slab, a couple things would be limiting factors there. Either A, you got to build the same size house as the slab you have. And let's just say that wasn't a problem. You're like, hey, I got a 40 by 60 slab. I want to build a 40 by 60 house. Okay, well, then we'd have to figure out, like, well, what are the load requirements for that structure? And does that existing slab meet those requirements? So those would be like two very, very, very like minimal things that you'd have to consider. To take that a step further would be this. When was that slab constructed? Because it could be an old slab, right? And then it could be a situation where that slab was constructed with materials that we now would consider hazardous or harmful, right? It was not uncommon for, you know, there to be asbestos or different types of silica and stuff in these materials from ages ago. And so now you're in a situation where no matter what you do, you're going to have to core drill that thing to test it, or you're going to have to end up cutting up pieces of it to pour additional footings and things like that. Now you're getting into this idea of like, now I got to cut this thing up that potentially has asbestos in it. Not to say that it would, but it could.
Yeah.
And that's another hurdle you're gonna fall under, because, you know, especially if you're in a place where you do have building codes, and let's just say that you decided to invest all this time and energy into, you know, not bulldozing up this old concrete and putting it new. Now you have to consider plumbing. Where's your plumbing going to be? You're going to have to core drill all that. You're going to have to or cut it up and run all your plumbing lines. You know, if you're going to have a kitchen island, like at least where we build, there's got to be electricity in that island. So now you got to run conduit to that. So you're going to have to do so much to it that it doesn't make sense. Now, so that would be the cost prohibitive for me. Would be, by the time you were done, you would have more money in trying to retrofit that slab than to just push it up and start over. Now, again, kind of converse to all of that happening, you've got a foundation, and you're now going to construct a $300,000 home on top of it. And let's just say now you have a soil settling problem, because now you're applying load to non-loaded soil that hasn't been compacted over time. Now you have a settling issue or a crack in that foundation, or you have something happening. Now you just risk your entire investment because you tried to save, what, 30 grand? So in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense.
I gotcha. All right, next one. It's kind of a loaded question, so we'll break it down a little bit. But pros and cons on some of the hot topics, such as spraying insulation, finished concrete floors instead of flooring, HVAC versus mini splits, and then open to the roof or finished 9-foot ceilings. So we'll kind of start in that spraying insulation from the, I guess, reference of our standards.
Right. So the reason why we do it is because we want to give people the best possible outcome. So to put, I've talked about this before, but to put spray foam into that building does a couple of things. And there's two different types of spray foam, right? You could get into closed cell versus open cell. Closed cell is fantastic. Problem for us with closed cell is it's 3 times the cost of open cell. There's not a ton of return on value if you were to spray that entire cavity with closed cell insulation. It just doesn't make sense. So you see some people doing these hybrid systems where they'll go in and put a 2-inch flash closed cell, then fill the rest with open cell, or they'll do 2 inches of closed cell with rock wool or fiberglass or cellulose insulation behind it. And they kind of call that like this HP system, high performing system. And it's great. I mean, it's great. It does. It seals up all the airflow, everything in the house. With that comes some other things that you got to take into consideration, like your air exchange in your HVAC system to get old air out, fresh air in, so that you're cycling those gases and all this stuff that's in your home. So that's now another cost prohibitive thing that goes into working with that. Open cell spray foam, in our opinion, does this, especially in the region we build in. I can't speak to extreme cold or moderate heat, like the different climates, but where we build, open cell spray foam gives us the best performance bang for the buck. So it fully insulates that cavity. It over insulates based off what our requirements are to meet code standards. But in addition to that, because it fills that entire void, it makes the building quiet as compared to anything else you could put in it. You could fill that void with fiberglass insulation. There's going to be slightly less insulated. There's going to be dead areas in there. There's going to be hot spots. It's inevitable with bat insulation. But the sound alone would be one of the biggest reasons why I think people would want to upgrade and go into this spray foam, because I remember the first home we did with the open cell, and we had been doing closed cell previous to that. And then we kind of changed our build standards to put the sheething in there and do all the things to build that thermal break from the metal siding and the actual insulation, so we could use open cell spray foam and use it properly. But I remember walking in there, and it was kind of moderately raining outside. And normally, like, I know exactly what that sounds like. And the thing about it is you still had the little tinkling sound of like rain, which is so nice with a metal roof, but it wasn't roaring. It wasn't like static on a TV to where you couldn't really hear what people were saying. And at that moment I was like, oh man, like, not only is it highly energy efficient, but it helps so much, especially in those large cathedral areas with keeping that sound deadened, and just making that home so much more comfortable. So is there other insulation systems you could use? For sure there is. I'd say bad insulation is fine, and it'll meet your code requirements. I just think you would regret doing it. Everyone will remodel their bathroom at some point. They'll redo their kitchen. They'll paint their house. They're never re-insulating.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to spend the money up front. Go ahead and get that done. That's why it became a standard here. Like, we don't even want to offer anything less because we know it'll be a regret if they didn't do it.
Yeah, and I know I see a lot of people on social media saying, oh, I can never afford that electric bill, all this stuff. But, I mean, we've gotten reviews from some of our clients who've built a 1,700 square foot Barndo, and their electric bill's under $100. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're super energy efficient.
So the next part of that question is the finished concrete floors instead of flooring. I guess they would mean LVP or just hardwood floors. Yeah,
if I could ever convince anyone to not do something, it would be to do raw concrete in their home. It looks cool. I know everybody wants it. Like, we even had this in a home that we previously owned, and it does look cool, and it's pretty resilient, right? It's concrete. The problem with it is expectations that people have with it, right? To do a concrete floor, you're going to have cracks in it. Not if, just where.
It just adds character.
Yeah. And you don't know where. You don't know where it's going to crack. There's going to be cracks. There's going to be spider cracks in it. That, and some of them may be just little hairline cracks, but they may run for a little ways. It's just part of the nature of concrete. Concrete cracks, especially as that home settles over time and stuff, you're going to have those imperfections in it. The other side of it is the pain of protecting that floor during construction sometimes becomes a nightmare.
Yeah.
And so we do everything we can to protect it. Like, we're putting down the right things. I mean, we've tried every way in the book. We've had people tell us, like, hey, just leave it and then grind it at the end and seal it. That doesn't work. You still end up with something, right? Or you protect everything. You put down all the plywood, and you put down all the ram board and everything to keep that floor completely protected from getting. And the biggest thing you're trying to protect it from is stains. You don't want somebody spilling something on it. You don't want getting tire marks on it from scaffolding and things being in there. Like, because again, they want to leave it exposed. Everyone we've ever put it in their home, within a couple years, covers it up with something because it's cold to their feet. And then you're going to have people that jump on here and be like, well, that's why you should put,
in-floor heating.
Oh my God. And so geothermal should be involved in this. And like, if you live in an area of the country where geothermal makes sense, knock yourself out. Where we build, there is no return on investment with geothermal. It does not make sense to do it. If you want to do it, we'll be happy to do it for you. But it's just because you want it, not because you need it, and not because it's going to add any value to your experience. But concrete's cold, concrete's hard to clean. It's very meticulous in how you have to care for it, and now it's been sealed with something, and so it gets old quick. And then most people have something, right? They do a change order. It's inevitable. We're building out the kitchen. They're like, the more we look at it, we really want to put our sink in the island now. And we're like, that's awesome. I have to now saw out your concrete floor and put pipes in the ground to get it there. And like, so you're in a whole new world. And it's inevitable. If they're going to do an exposed concrete floor, they're going to change their mind on something, or something's happening in the process to where now there's damage. So now you're trying to figure that whole piece out. Now, it just keeps adding elements of cost. And you're like, well, we could come in and we can skim the whole floor out, or we could do this, or we could apply these finishes to it. And like, you can do so many things. You could put epoxies down, and you can marble them, and you can stain them, and you can acid wash them. And they're like, you can do an abundance of things with concrete floors, but in my opinion, they are a fad. And I don't know people in their home where they're like, I love that we did this.
Yeah.
And not to say that there's not people. I'm sure there are some people that are like, this is the best decision we ever made, but they're few and far between. And again, we get more calls back asking if we could come in and put LVP in their house 6 months to a year later than anything else that we do.
Yeah. So what about pros and cons of HVAC versus mini splits?
So HVACs and mini splits, both great systems. It just depends on what your use is, right? So I'd say one of the downsides to doing a mini split would be if you're building a home and it's just this, it's a home inside of a Barndo build, mini split is not a great option. Yeah. Because there's things that you're not thinking about. It is cool that you could climate control each zone of your house, but you also have to have the outside unit. And so you end up with these things like stacked around the property, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't think about this. So in my opinion, if you're building a home to live in, you should put central in, because it's going to be more efficient. Number two, we always are doing like dual zones inside of our homes, even if they're single story, because of the way we build with our trusses and these big ceilings. Like, you end up with a dual zone, even with a traditional HVAC system. So you're kind of controlling some of that in and of itself already. Where mini splits really come in handy are like, hey, we want to have the potential to heat and cool our garage.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll install a mini split. Or they've got a bonus room. Okay, let's put a mini split. We're not using this room all the time. Okay, let's put a mini split. That makes sense. But to just say, hey, we're going to do our whole home with mini splits because somebody said it was a great idea. Yeah. It's not a great idea. I would highly recommend you don't do that.
Yeah. All right. So the last part of this question is the pros and cons to open to the roof or finish 9-foot ceilings. So I know we've done both. So
yeah. So like in our main living areas, I would say open that bad boy up. I mean, that's your wow factor, And again, because of the way we're taking extra steps to insulate, it's not like it's going to be something you need fans, and you need good insulation, and it'll be comfortable, and it's not going to burn your utility bill up. I'm going to apply this to like central living area, gathering areas, but like bedrooms. So we've had several people, we build their home and they're like, hey, in our master, we just want to go ahead and open that thing up. What are pros and cons to that? All right. Pros are you got a cool ceiling. Con is in a more like intimate setting where it's, it's not gathering of people, but it's just you and someone else. Like they tend to be hollow filling rooms, right? So like you're having conversations and you got a big room there. You got a lot of like sound is kind of not contained. And so you lose a little bit of that, or like your TV's over on that wall and you're trying to lay in your bed and you got this big room. Like it sometimes can affect that.
Okay.
The other side of that is this. Somewhere, because we're building on a slab, we've got to incorporate your HVAC. So if you had 9-foot ceilings there, your vents would be conveniently located throughout the room. If you're building fully open ceilings, chances are we're having to come out of a wall. And again, it may be on the opposite side. Not to say that it won't force air into the room and cool it. It's just those are things you have to think about. Like, are you a hot sleeper? if that's the case, I wouldn't recommend it at all. But it's going to cost more. So I would say pros and cons of that would be, a con to having a 9-foot ceiling is it makes the space feel smaller. So, again, like we have a line of products called SFH. And it's wood truss. It's designed to be able to build the space on a budget. So if you can't afford to build exactly what you wanted, but the space is important, and you have this budget, we do have a line of SFH to where we can come in and build it with wood trusses and give you the low ceilings throughout, give you the living space you need, meet those minimum necessities for your family. But you lose out on some of that grandeur. It makes the room feel smaller. It's definitely going to heat and cool better. But that would be the biggest thing, like outside of the main living areas, because that's calculated into our costs. But in those additional rooms to raise those ceilings, it's going to be an additional cost.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we got this question on one of our posts that we posted on Facebook. It was that Phillips custom build, and so someone asked, "Can you turn the garage part back where living area ends and make a living area 10-foot sidewalls and garage area 16-foot sidewalls to accommodate a motorhome or a fire truck?" So I guess kind of splitting that garage space and living space.
Yeah, I'm trying to envision this in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do anything.
Yeah.
Right. So to answer the question, long story short, of course you could. I think if I'm envisioning this plan correctly, rather than doing all that, what I would recommend is doing side entry garage doors.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you would have access to put larger doors in, because those garage doors were coming in off the eave side. If we were to move the garage doors to the gable side, then you have that entire area in there to where you could put a larger garage door, and you could of course put a motorhome or anything you wanted inside that garage, as long as we made it fit the size of the machine you're trying to put in there. But of course you could. I mean, anything's possible inside of building these barndos. I mean, I can't say anything's possible. At some point, you're going to meet the limits.
At some point.
But yeah, I mean, of course you could. Like all the cool thing about the plans and stuff that we have available and every build that we post is like that started in somebody's brain, and we made it come to life to fit their needs. And so the funniest thing in the world for me is to see somebody on a plan, or we share a plan, or we share pictures of a home, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. I would never do it that way. This and that, this and the other." And I'm like, "That's awesome. That's why we offer these custom designs." And I can promise you, when we did yours and we posted photos, there will be someone just like you in the comment section talking about how terrible it is.
Yeah.
But of course it's possible. I mean, we can accommodate so many things. We've done so many houses. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it's in construction or about to begin construction, but we have a home that we're building right now to where they travel all the time. And so they have this massive motor coach.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. It's one of our, I think it's one of our Aspen plans with the detached garage, and it's got that big one in the middle for the motorhome. Yeah,
no. So this one I was about to talk about it's that same concept, but basically it's got 800 or 900 feet of living space, and then this monstrous garage. With I mean, it's the biggest garage door we've ever installed. And it was like a special order situation, but I mean, they have a monstrosity of a motor coach that they're trying to put in there. And the guy's comment was, "I can drive it forward, great. But backing it up, I'm not so confident. So I want to make sure that it's plenty big." And so we designed that space around that to meet that need. But of course, I mean, we can literally achieve almost anything that people dream up.
Yep. So next question is, will you contact the city I live in to see if they will allow a barndo to be built, or do I have to do that? So from a permitting perspective.
Yeah. So we the best practice there is for the homeowner to do it. The reason behind that is it's your property, right? So when you call, they're going to talk to you and they're going to give you all the information. For us, they're not going to give us all the information because we don't own the property. They're like, "Why are you calling?" There's a little bit of like protecting that there.
Yeah.
The second side of that is I think you should do your own due diligence. Now, I would be willing to bet if you're in one of our build areas, you can absolutely construct a barndo there. What tends to be more of a limiting factor is if you're in an HOA or a municipality that has additional zoning or additional like covenant restrictions, and they're going to limit like materials that you can use, but there's nothing to prohibit you from building a certain type of structure. Like that doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's got to be in a state I'd never live in, right? But like, so yeah, I would say you could do that, but I would not have a concern of can I build a barndominium here. The bigger question would be, are there restrictive covenants to the property I bought because it's within a community or it's been subdivided and there's some things carrying with the deed of that property that said, hey, these things can't be built here. That would limit you. But as far as a municipality saying like, hey, you can't build a barndo, well, define a barndo would be my first question, So yes, I would say that's a homeowner responsibility. And when you have a conversation with our sales members, they're going to tell you again, like, hey, you need to be following up with this because there's a lot of other things that you need to be asking them at the city, like, hey, who's my power company? Once you understand that, then it's like, hey, where's access to my property coming from? So you need to call the power company. Hey, how are we going to supply power to this? Like, secondly is, do I have access to sewer, or am I going to have to put in a septic tank? Again, you're going to have to reach out to your municipality, work with the local agency there, get that permit for your septic tank. They're going to have to come out, perk your land. They're going to tell you where that septic's got to be. Now your home's going to have to be somewhere in proximity to that. So those are some of the controlling and limiting factors to what they can and can't tell you. I don't think it would be as much of like, can I build a barndo here, as much as what can I build here? And then once you've done all that and you got all that information, now we have everything that's necessary to facilitate you through the rest of that. But again, it does require you reaching out to the municipality. Now, sales agents would be great, and they got awesome cheat sheets to give you, to make it easy. But yeah, you got to be the one to pick up the phone and call.
All right, so our next two questions are shell questions. So the first one is, once a shell is complete, siding on, rough plumbing, concrete and floors, doors and windows in, interior framing done, what % in dollars of the build is left to do?
Between 40 and 60%. And the reason why there's a 20% discretion there is I don't know what you're putting on the inside of the house.
Yeah.
So they said a shell's built, siding, windows and doors are in, interior framing, but no rough ends or anything, like no plumbing, electrical's been done yet.
Yeah, rough plumbing, concrete flooring. Yeah.
Okay.
So plumbing.
So basically, like our shell build. I would say you probably still got, again, closer to 50 to 60% of the money is left at that point, because you're finished. Like your cost savings is in the initial structure. You're not saving money on those interior finishes because it's not like we have special Barndo drywall or special Barndo flooring or special Barndo cabinets. Like you're buying conventional stuff.
Yeah.
And then it just really lends itself to your taste. Like if you're building with us, I can tell you exactly what it's going to cost. Because I know what we're putting in your house. But when you're going completely carte blanche on this thing, like I have no idea. Yeah. We've had builds where in the beginning, like within the first 30 or 40 builds we did, we had 4 builds that were the exact same plan. Two of them were in the same county, and then 2 of them were in 2 separate counties, but they're all like sister counties. And I mean, identical builds. The only things that changed was the finishes. And those floor plans, those builds, the cost variance was over $200,000 from the cheapest one to the most expensive one. Now, how the heck is that possible? It was all the interior upgrades and all the things that they did differently. Yeah. We had somebody that went as basic as we could possibly go, and even did downgrades back when we would allow people to do that.
Yeah.
And we had 2 of them that were pretty much standard builds. The biggest differences were like some of them had, I think, tile in the guest bathrooms around the tub rather than an insert. But for the most part, they were really similar. And then one of them was completely custom cabinets. They did like a full brick chimney for a wood burning fireplace. They did a bunch of custom inset, like tile backsplashes and tile bathroom floors and tile kitchen floors and all these different upgrades. And it was insane to me that those 4 houses from the most expensive to the least expensive was just under $200,000 in difference. And that again, that's why we have so many standards now to control some of that, because it's hard for a homeowner, if you've never built a house, to know. And that's not to say I won't let you spend your money. Please upgrade your heart, upgrade your heart out. But that's impossible for me to answer accurately without knowing exactly what you're putting inside of it.
Yeah.
But I would say safe bet would be somewhere between 40 and 60%.
Gotcha. All right. So last question is also about a shell build. So what all is included in the shell only construction option? Do you have a hybrid construction option? So not completely turnkey, but more construction than just our basic shell for homeowners that want to DIY some aspects of the construction? And how would this affect cost?
So a standard shell build, and I'm going to get butchered on this because it's changed so much. I'm going to give my best shot here. Please reach out to your sales representatives and let them confirm. But to my knowledge, the way that we're handling shells now, because it's changed just a little bit, because we offer a little bit more than just building a shell, is we do your concrete, but you supply your own plumber. So before we get there, you've got to have a plumber that's going to plumb your entire house, and they come in and do the underslab plumbing. Okay. So we'll come out, we'll form the thing up. They come in and run their plumbing. And the reason behind this is plumbers, it protects you as a consumer, because you don't want my plumber to do the underslab, and then your plumber comes in later and he blames my plumber blames your plumber. It's ridiculous. So it's better to have one trade throughout the entire build. So you call up your plumber and say, hey, come run this underslab. We're going to supply them with the plans to do it. They get all that done. Then we come in and we pour concrete. We erect the shell, traditional shell of all the exterior walls, the siding, the roofing, the fascia and soffit. The windows and doors are installed. And then we typically do interior framing as well, because it's just easier to tile that together for the homeowner all in one fell swoop. And that constitutes a shell. And then again, porches or garage space if they're included. So we would erect all of that. To do hybrid builds, we would probably say no. Now, there are probably circumstances to where we could work something out. Here's the biggest issue. On a shell build, homeowners are pulling their own permit, or they're working with another GC that is pulling the permit, and they're only hiring us as trade labor to build that structure. So we're not pulling the permit for that job. We're not the managing the entire thing. We're only performing one specific trade. To do a hybrid, you would almost have to be in the same scenario, because if I go and pull all the permits, when I leave, I got to shut my permits down. If you didn't facilitate this correctly, now you're going to have to go and apply for all new permits, and now you're paying for permits twice. So it would have to be some situation where you're working with another GC, and again, we're coming in and doing pieces and components, or you're self-constructing and you pulled the main permit. But what ends up happening is they're like, hey, well, my Uncle Jimmy's an electrician. He's going to do the electrical work. Right. But we need you to do the HVAC and the plumbing. Okay. So, okay, that's fine. And then we also want you to do the drywall and get the drywall finished. And then we'll take it over from there, because nobody wants to do drywall. And so what ends up happening is once there's a break in the chain of command, so we come in, we put in that HVAC, we run the plumbing. Now you've called your electrician, your buddy, whoever it is, to come in and handle that component of your build. Now we're dependent on their scheduling. I don't know them. I have no idea if they're going to perform. I don't know what their process looks like. And so what ends up happening is they 9 times out of 10 are way delayed. And so it offsets the schedule. And then that starts creating friction right from Jump Street. And then we come in and we do our drywall, and then we leave, right? And now you've called in, you've done all your painting, and now you're doing all your rough ends to where you're putting in all your switch panels and all that stuff, and you realize, like, oh my God, my electrician put all these wires in the wrong places, and so he's cutting new holes, or he didn't stub his cans out in the right area. Like, something's happening to where he's damaging that. Now you're calling me back saying I need to come back and touch up the drywall. It's not worth it. So typically what we say is we'll build up to a point. And at the point that our trades leave, we do not return to that site. So, have we built them in the past where we've got people all the way to the end and painted the house and we did not install flooring, trim, interior doors, cabinets? Yes. would we do something like that? It depends. You'd have to ask your sales agent, and they'd have to coordinate it, because there might be a chance where we're like, absolutely not, because we're overbooked and it doesn't make sense. Sometimes we will say yes, but again, that's typically what we say is like, hey, once you break the process of where our trades stop, we stop completely, because we're not going to skip a few months while you got whoever and whatever going on in there and then come back in and assume our role. That's not going to happen. So it's just, from a liability standpoint, it's disastrous for us. From an expectation standpoint, it's impossible to manage it, and you're going to end up being a spitting mad client that leaves us a terrible review. And then lastly, again, to cover you don't want that. You don't want two competing people pointing the finger at each other during your project, because at that point, neither one of them lose, but you do. So I would say that would be a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all the barn burners I've got for you.
That's it? I thought you was going to grill me.
Hey, got some.
Well, guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this episode of the podcast. The whole purpose behind this and the mission behind this is to try to make barndominiums more easily accessible, to help educate people on how to go about pursuing a barndominium. If you're in one of our markets, so if you're in the state of South Carolina, the parts of North Carolina that we serve, or Eastern Tennessee, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to come in and build this thing for you, complete turnkey. Again, we also offer shell builds. But again, once we break down that potential cost savings, 9 times out of 10 people end up going full turnkey with us, because it just doesn't make sense to build a shell only in the grand scheme of things. Again, we offer plans nationwide. We can help you with custom design. And we got some really new cool things that are coming your way soon. So as always, I appreciate you guys tuning into the show. Love you. Mean it. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to the Barndo Show podcast. If you're watching on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this content, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And then be sure to check us out on all of our social media platforms at the Barndo Co. Super simple to find us. And then when you're ready to dive in a little more, maybe look around some of our available floor plan options, or take a look at the gallery of our work, or maybe you're ready to connect with our team and explore what it looks like to build your dream barndominium, you can visit us online at thebarndoco.com.